Have you ever been given advice that wasn't advice? Those well-meaning folk who tell you to just ignore it when someone's nasty to you, or tell you there's plenty of more fish in the sea when you're dealing with a breakup. I find that people are full of sayings like that when they don't really know what to say or how to help. To get to my point, I've heard some comments recently on my films about practice. The fact that art teachers tell you to just practice and you'll get better. Now, I'm guilty of saying this because unfortunately, it's true. The only way to get better at something is to keep doing it. You don't expect to just play the Moonlight Sonata on the piano the first time you sit at the keys. However, a good teacher will tell you how to practice and not just expect you to get on with it. A good teacher will give you interesting, fun things to do. When I was in teacher training 20 years ago, a lecturer of mine called this edutainment. Yeah, I nearly spat out my tea too, but to be fair, he had a point. If it's going to stick into your brain, it needs to be interesting. This is precisely why I talked about doing a colourful mandala last week. Enjoyable, pretty, makes you think while you're working on it. We're going to start with something similar in this film. This week, I'm going to help you with tonal work, also known as value study, to see if I can help you see things a little more clearly. Often when you begin with lessons on this subject, a teacher will instruct you to draw bars and boxes and fill them with different depths of grey, but I want to do this a bit differently and make it more interesting. And you can do this one while not watching the TV, instead of scrolling through your phone. I want you to take a whole piece of paper and draw a geometric pattern. Doodle away to your heart's content, making shapes. Make sure you throw in some circles, that's important. Add some wavy lines like isobars on a weather map. Make it completely random. Take a line for a walk until your paper is full of shapes. Get a number of drawing pencils, nothing with an H in the value. I usually sketch out with a 2B and then add tones with a 4B and 6B. Start to fill in your shapes, making sure each box has a tone different from the box next to it. Have fun working out the visual puzzle of how you're going to manage that. Whether you block in a tone or graduate the marks from dark to light within a box. Try to go from right to left of the paper if you're left-handed, vice versa if you're right-handed. It's a good tip to put another piece of scrap paper under the heel of your hand whilst you block in the tones to prevent yourself from smudging what you've already done. While we're on the subject of smudging, don't do it on purpose. Please. Please imagine me smacking you upside the head like Professor Snape every time you're tempted, because it doesn't look good and you won't learn anything by doing it. I've seen people licking fingers and rubbing their drawings, and it's a giant bugbear of mine because all you do is leave oily, spitty finger marks on your work, and it's horrible, and don't make me go and get Joyce back and tell you off. Sorry about that. Tonal value has two different elements, pressure and density. The amount of pressure you put on the page will change the mark you make. Practice this with the pattern. Try to change the pressure you're putting on the page with your hand from one side of a shape to another. The pencil you're using will also determine the pressure you need. Darker tones will be easier to achieve with a 6B because the lead's softer. If you're going for subtle, lighter tones, use a 2B at the same level of pressure to get the effect that you want. Density is all about how much you work into a particular space. If you look at tonal work done with pens, such as graphic novels, you'll notice that single pen lines in the same direction are used at different densities, that is, closer or further apart, to denote different tonal values, like contours on a map, denoting the height of the land. Newspaper print works in a similar way. The dots used, known as Ben-Day dots, sit closer together. They're more densely packed when a darker tonal value is needed. So when you draw, the more marks you make, the more dense the surface will become. I'm going to talk about different types of mark making in a moment, but the tonal pattern is a place to experiment with the pressure and density of your marks. Mark making can vary greatly, and it often comes down to a personal style or preference. I'm drawing 3 spheres here to show you some different techniques that will help give you a starting point. The first is a very smooth surface, and using the side of a sharp pencil will make this easier. You'll need to hold the pencil slightly differently for this, but it's easy to get the hang of it. Work softly and build up the tones in layers, making sure to look at the light source of your subject. I'll talk about that later. A putty eraser can help remove the tone if you go too dark. A putty eraser is an artist's eraser that can be moulded and rolled gently over a surface to remove marks. The second middle sphere is using a style called cross-hatching. You may have noticed from my own drawings that I prefer this method. I like to see the pencil marks and don't like my drawings to be too smooth and perfect. That's just me, you're free to disagree. As I've said before, I'm never going to tell you the proper way to do things. There is no proper way. This is just how I do things. Use pencil strokes in different directions to build up your image like weaving a pattern into the page. Again, density is the key to this, and using your pencil in different directions will give the work balance. For the third sphere, I've used contour shading. This means following the shape of the object itself to inform the marks you make. The sphere will have curved marks following its shape both horizontally and vertically, like lines of latitude and longitude on a globe. It can also help your work if you think about the light source. In this study, all my marks radiate from the point of light on the sphere. Now it's time to really look at light and how it affects your tonal values. Put together a still life, a group of objects to draw. Make sure they're simple things like boxes, vases. Eggs are good. Things that have no writing on them, no complicated fiddly bits. Make sure every object you pick is white or at the very most beige or grey. You don't want to be distracted by or get sucked into the details this time. Put the objects on the plain white paper surface and try to block out the background with white as well, so that all you see is your objects. Find yourself a strong light source, an angled lamp or a torch, and point it at your objects. Think about the light and how it changes as you move. Notice the shadows on the paper and in the still life. Their intensity will change, as will the lighter areas, depending on where and how close the light source is. Let's think about light for a moment. Why can you see any of the objects around you? Because of the light and how it falls on things. In total darkness, you see nothing. This seems obvious at first, but think about it in terms of your still life. You can only see it because light is falling on it at different levels. Objects don't have outlines, they have tonal values. It's up to you to interpret those on your page. Pick an interesting place to leave your light and get drawing. The purpose of drawing this piece is to make you really look. Remember, draw what you see, not what you think you see. You're slowly learning how to look with my tutorials, that's my main aim. Look, don't just see. Concentrate on where the darkest and lightest tones are. Remember to put a scrap of paper under the heel of your hand and work from one side to the other. Use what you've discovered working on your pattern. Think about what kind of marks you want to make. Is this drawing going to be smooth or scribbly? You decide, there are no wrong ways. Except for the finger smudging thing. No excuses for that method. Putting my foot down on that one. Sorry. If you really want to challenge your brain, it can help to reverse things. When shading on white paper, you're concentrating on putting in the dark tones, and the paler tones are, to a certain degree, taken care of by the paper itself. Swap to black paper and a white pencil or pastel or paint, and you have to think about blending the paler tones and leaving the darker tones alone. Pick some simple objects again and try to flip things around. It might take a few attempts because you really have to change your perception here and look closely at what you're doing, but give yourself a challenge. You could also use black paper and use a white pencil to mark in the darker tones, flipping your work into a photographic negative, but that's for the fairly advanced. Only do that if you're the kind of person who likes to let go of the handrails on the roller coaster, the kind of person that goes to the supermarket without a list. You know, those of you living on the edge. So, a quick recap while I do another little sketch of Kathy Hay. Thank you to everyone who entered the competition last week. The results are on my Instagram page now. I might give this drawing to her actually. Anyway, do a pattern with tone. It can be quite relaxing. I enjoy doing mine for you. Remember not to smudge, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Think about the density of your work and the pressure you use. Get the feel for your equipment, good pencils with no H values and paper with a high GSM value. That's the number relating to the thickness and quality of the paper, the higher the better. Collect some simple objects and draw without the radio interference of colours and details. Challenge yourself, and I'm sorry to say this, but practice. It really is the only way, but the key is knowing how to practice. Work on the ideas I've given you as a starting point and work towards getting more confidence in your abilities. Soon enough, you'll be working on things like this. Glass and water are two things that people often find difficult to draw because they look complicated. But when you break it down into manageable shapes, it doesn't have to be. If you're feeling a little more advanced, have a go. Get rid of peripheral things with a white background again and really look. Think about the geometric pattern practice and divide up what you see into different spaces of tone. I'm just going to leave you watching this piece come together so you can think about how it's done and realise what's possible with some experience. Because if you keep at this, you'll be flying soon. Tell me what you need help with in your drawing and I'll do what I can. Show me your work if you're brave enough. I always enjoy seeing what you guys can do. Contact me by commenting below or signing up for email tips and chatting with me on Instagram at PartyMouse76. See you soon.